Hey there, it's Sandy, and I'm doing a coloring video for you today. This is a subscriber's choice. I gave you a choice of images in my last video, and you overwhelmingly picked the Stamper's Best turtle that's just been released. Go to stampersbest.com to pick him up. He's a fundraiser stamp for OWH. And I'm going to be coloring him green and making him look all dimensional using the green set from the Copic website. They have these trios of markers now, and they have a dark, medium, and light color. So I'm going to be trying those in some of my next videos and experimenting with how they blend and making sure that that's the colors I would recommend for you to use. Now, greens in general, I've always struggled with. They're fine if you're coloring, or at least they're fine for me. I'll just say that it could be my own issue. They're fine for me if I'm coloring leaves on a flower or some small piece. It's a little more challenging when you're doing an entire image like this one. So I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. I'm deliberately going to do something a little funky at the end, and I will show you kind of how it can go wrong, just so that you can see what to do and how to recover from it. But G40 is the lightest color, and I'm laying a base coat of that down on the entire image first before I start doing shading. And so this is G99. This is the darkest color in the trio of markers, and going to lay down just the shadows in this top portion of his shell. You can do one section of the shell at a time. You don't have to do the entire thing, but for expediency, I'm going to lay down all of the G99 on this top section. So I'll do each of these things by group to kind of give you an overall feel for them. Now I'm using a G94, the medium tone in the set, and I'm going to lay down a little bit more of the green, just kind of dragging some of that color up, letting it blend with the G99, and pulling that up further into the image. And I'm going to kind of have the light go from behind him a little bit and above, not just completely from above. So the bottom pieces are going to have more shading than the top pieces, and you'll see how that plays out in just a few minutes. And while I'm coloring, I want to apologize for the lighting. I did get this new camera, so it looks a lot clearer to me, but I also did not get new lights. I tried doing this in my light box. I thought it would be an interesting experiment to try that, and that does not seem to be bright enough. I'm not really sure what I'm going to have to do for my lighting, but when I get my new craft room set up, I will take care of that. So I'm going back in with the G40. Now I'm going to be doing a bunch of layers of the greens in order to blend them the way I want to. When you go over things with this light green or any of the light greens, I find that they kind of make a little texture in the medium and dark greens. So I want to build up layers very slowly as I start moving across the image. These ones at the bottom, I want to be mostly the medium green. So I'm flicking super light on top of the shading I've already done on those bottom ones. I'm not really leaving a whole lot of the G40 just by itself without any of the darker green within it. And the top pieces I'm shading less. Now I'm going to go back in again with the G40, and I'm going to soften that again. Underneath here is what I consider the shading underneath of the shell itself. So I filled in those two sections, and now I'm going to do the same tonality on his underside and on his legs, not the toenails, and the tail. Kind of the same thing as I did before. So I'm taking the G99 and putting in really good shadows. Oops, forgot that little piece right there. And then I'm going to add the G94 again and go in. This piece under here is completely in shadow under his chin, so it's going to be really dark. And now I'm going to flick again from the G99 upward and smush it around a little bit so I get that blended. And then I'll do the same thing with the G40 because I want to get those two tones the same. You see the difference in the top of the shell when I went over it a whole bunch of times with the light green versus the parts that were just one layer of light green? The more you build up, the more times you color over and over something, you can kind of change the color on the fly just by putting layers of that single color again and again over top of it. So you can start seeing a little bit of how that texture is appearing right there on that front foot. So I'm going to do a little bit more covering up of that, but I'm just going to build it in layers little by little. You can leave them to dry and then come back in and work at them a little bit more again. I'm just trying to keep them smooth while not letting that, that little weird texture thing kind of start to appear. So I'm just doing less and less touching of it as I get further on so that I don't end up going over top and messing it up. Now this middle section is going to be a lot of G94. I'm not going to use any of the G99 because I want this section to be lighter than the others so that you see a difference in part of his shell than other parts of it, because otherwise he'll be just one big green blob. So the G94 is what I'm using for the shading, and now go back in with the G40 again and blend all that out. And I'm going to go back and forth a couple times with this just because I'm not really thrilled with the way it came out the first time, so I'll add a little bit and then go over it again. When you go over a color with a light color like the G40, you're not necessarily erasing, but you're lightening the other color that's there. So I want to make sure there is actually some more color there because I took away too much. And you can see I've also, like around his neck, there's a little less of that light part because that's not going to stick out. But the fact that I've got a lot more light color on this bottom portion means that looks like that part of his shell is flaring out, because right above it is all dark stuff, but then it curves out. So it just makes it look more realistic, like the light is really shining on him and he's got a lot of pop and dimension to him. So again, I'm using G94 only for the shadows in his feet, and then I'm going to use the G40 and blend it out just the way I did with the others. When you're talking light colors, the less you touch it, the better. If you can do it in one quick stroke and you get good enough to be able to do that, that's kind of the optimum, because you really want to use as little as possible or as little as necessary rather than going in over and over again. So now is where I'm going to get kind of goofy with it. I'm going to try to see if I can get it to create that weird texture and show you kind of the way that I recover from that. This is G94. I'm not using the G99 on his head, and I'm just adding in more of the G40. And by the way, this is sped up to 1.5 times speed, if that is helpful information. I don't usually color this fast. Alright, so now I'm going to go in again with the G40, and you can just start seeing as I'm doing this, the G40 is kind of making a weird texture right along where they blend. They're not super smooth, and I don't know what it is with the greens. It is just the way it is. Someday I'm going to figure out what the deal is with Copic and greens, but just going to keep going over and over and over it again. Now I can keep getting lighter, because the more the G40 I put in there, the more it takes out the G94, and then just go and add some of that back in. And as I've been working on this, you can probably see that the green highlights on his nose are darker than the green highlights everywhere else on the turtle, because I am going over and over and over it, and I'm just working it to death. I just want to see how far I go and keep making a mess with it. And of course I've goobered with my pen there on his eyeball, but we're going to fix that too. The more ink you put on stuff like this, the more problem you're going to have too with bleeding. So if it starts bleeding too much, you can always set it aside and come back to it later. But I think I'm just going to leave that and let it be good enough and start working on his eye. I've got B21, which is a pretty strong green, or strong blue. And I'm just going to blend that out really simply now and soften it up. And I'm going to fussy cut him, so some of my coloring over the edges that kind of happened is going to disappear as I do that. And here's the finished card that I used him on, and since it's St. Patrick's Day weekend, I thought I would make it kind of a lucky card, but I didn't put St. Patrick's Day on it because then it can be used by our heroes any time of the year. So thanks so much for stopping in to watch, and I will see you next time. Thank you. Bye.